Hey, everybody. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live program. I'm Dr. Leann Pereira, Senior Director of Organizational Psychology at Emtrain. And we're here today to talk about the ethic of care within organizations, something that has come to the forefront during the pandemic. We're here today with Carin Knoop, who's the Executive Director of Global Research at Harvard Business School. We had the pleasure of speaking with Carin earlier this year during our conference. We also spoke on mental health and care issues then, and we received a lot of appreciation and support and questions about how to make that happen and to do more. So we're going to talk about that today. I'd like to take a moment to welcome Carin to the show. Carin, will you just give us a little refresher on your background?
Sure. So first, thank you very much for having me. It's my first LinkedIn Live, so now I feel like an internet grown up, and it's a pleasure to be here interacting with you after the People Leader Conference. So my interest is in mental health at work and how we design organizations that support workers. I've been interested in this field for a long, long time, and now with COVID, it's come to the forefront, which is, a great source of a lot of ache, but also a great opportunity. And we're gathering today to talk about building a caring company, which was one of your concepts that I found really intriguing. So looking forward to digging in.
Yeah, I know. I've been doing a lot of thinking and reading on the topic lately, and this is our area of research also. We look at manifestations in care through inclusion, ethics, and respect, but we never talk about it as care, and I don't know why.
Mhm.
And so because you're part of a wonderful institution, world renowned, maybe we can start our conversation with talking about what care is and where it might have a place in business education.
So I think that care is the ability to go outside of yourself and focus on someone else's needs. So I think the dictionary definition is showing kindness towards someone else, especially somebody who needs help. Often we think of it in terms of self-care, which is very much sort of focus on the individual. And I think if we think of caring for each other in an organizational setting, then we have a chance to make the lives of our colleagues better, and in doing so, making our own lives better. I think it's also an idea whose time has come, because when you look at the millennials, which I think by 2025 will be 75% of the workforce, I think the Gen Zs will be at 30%. You see them really wanting to work for companies that have purpose and a very strong CSR. And often, the CSR is external focus, which is on the impact of the company outside. But there might be an opportunity for management and companies to really engage individuals with caring for each other within the company, and in doing so, also building more solid links of caring.
I think it's important that we actually take a closer look at this as a culture and in general, because when somebody says in business, "I don't care," they're giving you a verbal slap in the face, right?
Mhm.
And it's really almost a curse word. And I mean, or on the other side, when they're saying, "I'm coming to you to talk about this because I care," all of a sudden we've opened up incredible new doors and the ability to build relationship. Yet whenever we talk about business and the industrial revolutions, when we're here at the fourth industrial revolution now, we're always focusing on machines or processes and AI, and we don't talk about care. We don't talk about the humanistic element. So I agree that it's about time, and I don't know. I struggle, and I don't know if anybody out there in our audience has a good reason for this. But do you do we know? Do you have any thoughts about why there is why care is so marginalized in our environments? Why aren't we explicit in our texts and history about it?
So we've been focused on performance and productivity and growth, and always more. So I think the entire production engine is geared that way. Our educational system is also very much geared on advancement, which, sometimes comes through teamwork, but often is sort of an individual success. We've groomed leaders who are, encouraged to be tough because we respect them more. And, we sometimes get worried when leaders show vulnerability. So I think it's been a long history and a long convolution, sort of convergence of a lot of factors. Productivity is also easier to measure in a way. So if I think of, if I were to say I'm going to be now running a caring company, how would I go about measuring it? And what does kindness mean to you? In order to know how to be kind to you, I have to know something about you. So I have to take time, which is something that people rarely are encouraged to take time in organizations. And then I would have to build a performance system that actually rewards kindness. So now you're seeing companies increasingly asking, employees, does your manager care? Do you feel supported at work? But when we have our own performance evaluations as individual contributors, I've never really been evaluated on whether or not I support my peers. So I think it would take a lot of change, both from a company standpoint, to signal that I'm going to be evaluating you on, the positive impact that you have on your colleagues and not just on your ability to sell a few more toothbrushes. Then you get to another problem of measurement, which is, how would you actually survey for that? But I think that might be a very interesting way to encourage people to think beyond themselves in organizations. It's interesting, you use the term, I don't care, and I come to you because I care, and these are words. I think there are also a lot of actions that people take. So now organizations are all saying, we really worry about employee burnout. Can I have this tomorrow, please? And we're all stressed, and so one habit maybe to be conscious of to help develop more caring in organization is hounding. So somebody sends you an email at 10 a.m. and if you haven't responded at 3, they will send you a passive aggressive reminder saying, maybe you missed my email. And in the past I used to answer saying, well, I'll get to it, I'm sorry. And now I say, I saw your email, I will get to it in priority, in the hope that this person will then think about the stress that they're creating by hounding. And sometimes things are really urgent, but sometimes we create false urgency because we really want to sort of tick something off our to-do list. So I think to be really building a caring company, you have to sort of catch yourself in these moments of not caring about your impact on others.
I think that's perfect. So hounding, if we find ourselves hounding others, or and hounding is continually sending emails, sending messages in multiple channels, expecting unreasonable, even putting unreasonable deadlines on something, then that is not care. That is the opposite of care.
Right. It can present. So, I mean, to me, care is kindness, but care might also be the lack of additional unnecessary stress. Because when we are kind to people, we try to make them feel good. So, just taking a time to sort of step back and say, is it really urgent or not? The other behavior is whining. We're all tired. I start whining. And then sometimes I catch myself saying, am I whining because it's bad? Or am I whining because I want to make myself feel better? And am I really improving the issue or just spreading my stress around? So there's a real contagion to these behaviors. So I put complaining and whining also in that category.
Yeah, I think sometimes complaining and whining, I spend a lot of time listening to folks who may be complaining and whining. I think that is my active care, because I do think that there is a need to vent. And I think especially when somebody is hounding you, right, and you have a lot of things going on, I think there is a need to vent, as part of. I think Amy Gallo has it in her Managing Conflict book,
Yeah.
that venting and actually restating the problem multiple times is part of working through a conflict. And but I recognize that that it is taxing for other people when we're all under constraints and we're all of limited resources. And so, one idea that has come up was the idea of self care. And you were talking a little bit about self care as being critical, if I'm understanding correctly,
Mhm.
critical to the whole approach to care. Can you say a little bit about that?
So if you start to understand yourself and focus on your own needs and understand how, triggers work and the importance of building space and, sleeping well, whatever it presents to you, then I think it gives you the ability to think that others would have the exact same desire for a particular set of needs, however they presents to them. So I think that, being self, it starts with the self and then extends to the team and then to the community in general. What I'm worried a little bit with the current focus, for example, on mental health apps, is that we're very much turning inward.
Mm-hmm.
Social media makes us turn inward. Narcissism seems to be really sort of increasing. This notion of maladaptive perfectionism, which is, if I do not conform to this perfect view of myself, then I will sort of start to act out or really misbehave. So I'm worrying that too much focus on self-care really brings us inside, when as humans we are sort of tribal animals, and we know from the study of religion or volunteering that being outward focused also brings us a lot of joy and connection, and enables us to care for ourselves too.
You mentioned something when we spoke earlier that, and I have two things in my mind. One is that you mentioned that a lot of individual contributors don't want to go into management roles,
Hmm.
and in my mind, the questions came up. Why not? Is it that they find that managerial roles require? Is it skills that they are not comfortable with? How does care relate to that and the need to care for others? Can you share a little bit about what you were thinking? And
So the report is really interesting. I think it's the end of management as we know it, maybe June or May 2020, BCG, and they did a follow-up report. I really recommend it. It's excellent. And the answer to your question also was that 81% of current managers, and this I believe was in 35 countries, thought that being managers today was a lot harder. So of course, this is 2020, so it's the pandemic. I think it must have been after the murder of George Floyd. And so this notion that managers have to be everything for their team was probably coming out. I think you're also seeing millennials being, you know, more reasonable and saying, I'm very happy to stay as an individual contributor, and I don't want to add this stress of being, a manager. So I don't think it's just about skills, Leann. I think it's also just about the demands that are being put on the managerial category. In the pandemic, we've all been transformed into, sort of emergency first responders for mental health, for arrangements. But I think these demands and these expectations will continue to be very high, and the that survey worried me a little bit, because then if that is indeed the case that people are going to opt out, then you have to ask yourself who is going to opt in. And then it might either be the people who are really committed to being caring managers, or it may be the ones that are able to say, I'm not going to take things personally, I will not get involved, I will just focus on performance. So I think it will be an interesting survey to watch as the years evolve. But I think that the trends have been clear for a while.
you also mentioned that this past year in the pandemic has put tremendous caregiving, caretaking responsibilities on everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing funny YouTube videos of a woman who has to, be the cook and the math teacher and the laundry person and working at the same time. And um, it's not funny because of
No.
the sheer insanity of having to do all of this at the same time.
Right.
Um, do you think it's safe to say, if we had to draw a line in the sand, is it safe to give the guidance that managers and people leaders should absolutely prioritize care in these times over performance if they had to make a choice, or what advice would you give?
I think it's really difficult, Leanne, because it's easy for me to say I work in an academic environment. If I were a startup founder, I would have to keep my company alive. I think what we're starting to see is that prioritizing care and support of the employees does really pay off, not just in people's performance, but also in people's longevity. You need to care and think differently about what people need, especially if you want to drive diversity through organizations. You need to get your entire enterprise taking care of each other, because you cannot just take care of everybody. People also need to take care of their own managers. Um, so I'm hoping that we can, reconcile both. But it's very challenging, and the world continues to be very, very fast and very high performing.
It does, and I mean, I think about Richard Boyatzis at the Weatherhead School of Management. He's done some fantastic research on leadership and sustainability and the effects of stress. And
Mm-hmm.
his he says that basically we're gonna burn out. Leaders will burn out. There's no
Mm-hmm.
question about it, unless they actually take a relational coaching type approach to managing, because he said that the only things that can help sustain emotional and psychological well-being is sort of like the milk of human kindness, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to have those relationships to heal the stresses, otherwise you burn out and become a less effective leader. And he did several studies. He looked at fMRI with some of his colleagues, brain scans, and looked at the way, the brain regions were lighting up. And so he's got fairly robust research base to
Mm-hmm.
support that care is, I want to say there, I don't know whether we're willing to say it's the most important thing or equally important, but by all means, it is a very important component that can't be ignored.
No,
And
and
yeah, go on.
sorry, no, and I was thinking that so on this weekend is I think International Kindness Day, and maybe a good takeaway from our chat is for all of us to spend a day or spend a few hours or a few minutes think about what does kindness mean to us at work. You see somebody on a Zoom call who's stressed. Can you put something in the chat or reach out after and saying, hey, hope you're doing okay, how's the deadline coming, how is the family? These little acts of kindness, I think, can really go a long way. Much as I started off negative with what are the behaviors that we exhibit that are challenging to others. I mean, to me, every human system or an organization is like the I don't know how you say it in English, but the mechanism in the clock. And every little drop of stress is like a little bit of sand, and sooner or later, the
Mm-hmm.
mechanism doesn't work anymore. And to me, every act of kindness is to say, can I remove a little bit of your stress, however it presents? I very much like your idea about the relational component, and but I think that also requires that you are in an organization that enables you to stop pretending.
Mm.
And that is very difficult also, because there too, we are now opening up more. But there's still the expectation that we are professionals, and there's some people for whom too much of a mix between the personal and the professional is very challenging. So, you know, we cannot pretend that everybody is the same, nor should we assume that everybody is the same or this is what we want. What I like about the relational stuff is that it's really paying attention to what is it that I need in this relationship and what can I be to the other person in this relationship. So more of a servant than I think a caregiver.
No, I think that there's that element of vulnerability and self disclosure that comes in this caring relationship, because as leaders, especially, right, a lot of leaders are not comfortable with vulnerability and self disclosure. And there's an expectation of having to be getting it right most of the time, at the
Mhm.
very least. But in the process of getting it right, there one doesn't have to arrive at the right answer immediately, right? So there
Right.
is this sense making process that I believe allows for opening up and asking questions and having that dialogue. And I think that dialogue in itself is care, isn't it? Right.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's the ability just also to watch out for, inflection points in people's lives, getting married, becoming a parent, just sort of being more attuned to the others. I think would be one way that would help bring, you know, purpose and some life and connection in organization, especially now that we're so remote. But you said it's difficult for managers or leaders to reveal, but I think it's even harder for employees
Hmm.
because it really would take a lot of courage, for an employee to go to a manager, to say, when you do this, this is how it makes me feel. Can we try to come up with a different approach? You have to have the courage and the ability as an employee to also say it. So I think it's difficult for everyone, Leann. I don't think it's just for the managers. The managers may be able to present it and offer up, if they do it, maybe the others will. But I think it's very much of a two-way street.
I couldn't, I believe that feels exactly right. And I think that there, there is a responsibility though for the leader to open that door, right? And
Mhm.
so one of the ways to demonstrate care from a leadership perspective is to open the door and invite and ask the question, how do you like to approach conflict, or
Mhm.
how do you um, is this style working for you? I mean, these are all best practices in leadership development,
Yeah.
that we all need reminders of. But it does speak to care, doesn't it? And it does change the way people feel. In fact, and I'm rambling a little. I'm sorry about that, but I'm myself going through this process. I find it when I work with my colleagues. When we're working with new team members, I think that there needs to be an expectation that an accommodation or a negotiation around practices will be made.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's certainly just a one-way street, isn't it?
Right, right. And I mean, certainly, one size fits all. I mean, we're at the beginning of our conversation, which is, the Industrial Revolution was the widgets. We're going to make everything as uniform as possible so that we can have as many people go through the chain. And we did this a little bit with humans, which was everybody showed up at work, dressed a certain way, behaving a certain way, expected to perform a certain way. And I think now, increasingly, we've realized that if you do that, sooner or later people will be disengaged. I mean, everybody's been, startled by low engagement numbers, but since 2006, Gallup has been doing their, engagement number, and it's been a third of the workers have been engaged at work. Now we're finally talking about it. But so the system that we had before wasted a lot of human potential. And what I like about these conversations and the conversations that we've been having through our broader LinkedIn family and the HR community and the leadership community is, there's a chance to get away from this Taylorism of humanity
Right.
and meet people a little bit more where they are. But it takes time, and being busy and pretending to be a superhero is still very, very ingrained. I think, especially in American culture. It's going to take us a while to move away from that.
And I like the way that you mentioned LinkedIn family. As we were preparing for this, I was talking to our producer Hasina, and I said to her, Hasina, is is caring for your colleagues at work really different from caring for the people at home? I mean, I had to reflect, do I spend less or more energy, not
Mm,
baby taking care of a baby aside, but I feel like it's about the same amount of effort and attention in general. I what do you think, Carin? Do you think that, how's that work
so
for
I,
you?
I don't know, because I haven't asked myself the question until you ask it, but I would say that it has challenges and good sides. So the good side about your family is that you know them a little bit better. So if you're genetically related to someone, you may know their proclivities. If you've been living with somebody for years, you may. The negative is that you have a whole story about how they are and how they behave. And, the landmark work around, we're already always listening for my mother as critical. I'm always already listening for my child as something. So we're less able to actually see the person as a person because we have created them into this sort of figment of our imagination and a collection of resentment. I think at work, or I'm a little grouchy today, or a collection of expectations.
That's okay.
It's because I'm being a caregiver. That's why. I think at work, I know even less about you unless I make the effort to. So, it's International Kindness Day. I think it's also Games Day or Games Week or something like that. I think if companies can start to have games where people can connect on very different levels, I think that would be good. Whatever you can find that enables people to discover themselves from multiple facets, I think would be good. And people do care for each other at work. You have these phenomenon of work partners. After layoffs, people get separated from their work families. So at work, less, but it might be a safer environment because I can confess to you things that maybe I wouldn't confess to my partner at home because you're going to go home to your environment. I'll go home to my environment. So I think they're both very complementary, Leann, very much.
I notice that the approach that I take with my adult son or my partner is there are a lot of similarities, and as I work to develop my own skills, this is a forever thing. I can apply what I learn at work
Yeah.
to home and vice versa because the one thing I always like to say is we are humans, and you are who you are no matter where you go, and so those rules or those principles still apply.
So one thing that humans don't like, though, is feedback. And I don't think that you can really have a caring company or being in a caring relationship if you do not solicit or accept feedback, and maybe both at home and work. Asking ourselves regularly, of each other, like, am I doing something that systematically leaves you more stressed? Or is there something that I could do that would really brighten your day? I could say thank you more, whatever it could be. So I think being more willing to solicit, to create that feedback loop would also be part of whichever caring model we use. A few years ago, the New York Times had this article about a couple that had performance reviews. I don't know if you remember seeing it. And
I don't think so. Yeah.
yeah, some of my friends thought it was really stupid. And I was like, no, because it's a forcing mechanism once a year to say, when you throw away the last piece of onion, it upsets me because I always keep it for something, or whatever it may be. So asking more questions might be good. So
Well, and we'll get to, there's a comment in the chat. I think we should get to that. But I also want to acknowledge that it is Veterans Day this week in the US,
yes,
and that is an incredible opportunity to demonstrate care and
yes,
support.
and gratefulness.
And gratefulness, definitely. By maybe just asking questions and getting to know folks, okay, the comment. I heard an interview on a radio show called Hidden Brain this weekend, and they talked about how one bad toxic encounter at work cannot be undone by many perks and benefits. It is not enough to just be a caring business that gives perks. You have to remove toxic behaviors encounters too. I wondered what you think about that.
So I think it's an absolutely perfect comment because it summarizes a lot of what has been done around mental health also in organizations, which is, let me give you more time off. Let me set up an EAP so you can go talk to people once the damage is done. You can go on a mental health leave once the damage is done so you can heal. And finally, now I think we're going a little bit upstream, which is what can be done for the damage not to be done in the first place. And that is avoiding these toxic behaviors. It is thinking about your impact as a manager, but also as a colleague, and also as a report, because reports can be plenty unsupportive of their managers. Of your contribution to this. We're in an emotional climate change crisis at the moment, which is everything is difficult, impatient, people are increasingly rude. So I think this, perks are not enough. I think words are certainly not enough. I think actions of caring and kindness do go a long way.
And the last thing I'll add to that, and I want to thank you everybody for hanging on with us. We're a little bit
Yes,
over.
thank you.
But I do, and this is something that AA uses as a principle, and you see this in philosophies and in religions. But I believe that there needs to be an acknowledgement of the person who is unkind. We all have our moments, and we can all be unkind,
Of course.
and there needs to be an acknowledgement and a working through. And so, if that person isn't willing to do that, then that is an issue for HR. And, that could be a point of escalation for sure.
Right. And I think, there's a difference between events and, our fellow conversants, use sort of behaviors which are more systematic, and they're, sometimes just being made aware will help someone, because sometimes we truly do not know how to be. So, but I think you have a really wonderful idea. The pandemic has also put a lot of focus on the caring professions. And so may we learn something about how they do their work and bring it into management.
Yeah, let's proceed with care for
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Well,
Leann,
Carin,
it's been
thank
a
you
pleasure
so
to see
much
you.
for taking
Yeah,
the time and
yes.
to
Thank you
speak
so
with
much.
us.
Thank you, Asina, for organizing. Thank you for joining us. Send us your thoughts. Bye.
Take care, everybody.